So we're starting a new topic. The topic is called forming equations. Now, equations are simply sentences. An equation is a short form of a sentence and must have an equal sign. And if you try and get that in your head, an equation is just a sentence. It's like a shorthand way of describing a sentence. And instead of words, you use symbols like plus or take away or multiply, divide. But after you've done that, you must have an equal sign. You must have equal to another number, okay? For example, if you had this sentence here, 10 plus something is 13. So we'll write 10 instead of plus, we'll write the plus sign. For something, we might be tempted to write a question mark. But what we're going to start doing now is write n. And n stands for like a missing number. So instead of thinking writing a question mark, write a letter of the alphabet, and we're going to use the letter N, is equal to 13. And we have formed an equation. 10 plus this something that we're trying to find is 13. We're not solving them just yet. We are just writing an equation. It has an equal sign, it has a letter and a couple of numbers and a plus sign. That is an equation. Something subtract 8 is 5. So something, so we're going to use this letter N for something. Subtract 8 is equal to 5. We've written an equation, and this time we're using subtract symbol. Still have an equal sign, we have a number at the end, and we have a letter which we're using for this missing number. So we can form equations from sentences, but we must use the correct functions such as multiply, divide, add or subtract, etc. And that's where people make mistakes. And you must have an equal sign. An equation must have an equal sign. That's what makes it an equation. And we're going to look at some examples. These are the kind of examples you're going to do in the worksheet. So I think of a number and I subtract 7, I get 9. So think of a number, n, I subtract 7 and I get 9. That is the equation for that sentence. It's much shorter. It says exactly the same thing as the sentence. I think of a number and add 11. I get 26. So think of a number, n, and add 11, and it is equal to 26. So we're not solving it, we're just writing the equation. We still don't know what this number is. We're using n to stand for this number that we thought of. I think of a number and multiply by 5. I get 55. So I think of a number, I multiply by 5, and I get 55. So that is one way to write that question down. However, last year we were doing a little bit of algebra. We did a little bit of work with this kind of expression. And instead of writing it as n times 5, we should really write it as 5n. So n times 5. Or n times 5. This means the same thing, okay? And it's just a shorter way. Equations and algebra are all about writing things as short as possible. So this answer is the best answer for this sentence. I think of a number and divide by 4, and I get 11. So I think of a number, I divide by 4, and I get 11. So that's an equation. However, this part here is better written as n divide by 4. That's a way of showing divide. Just draw a line in between two values and you're showing you're dividing the top one by the bottom one equals 11. So this is the better way to write the equation. This is not wrong, completely wrong, but this is better. I think of a number, multiply by 4, and then I add 6. So this type of sentence has two things happening. You multiply by 4 and then you add 6 and you get 34 at the end. So we'll start with the multiply by 4. I think of a number and multiply by 4. So now we know that we should really write it like that. 4n, 4 times n. And add 6. And you get 34. And that is that equation. I think of a number, I multiply by 4, and I add 6, and I get 34. That's the short way of writing that sentence. I think of a number, multiply by 8, and subtract 4, and I get 52. So I think of a number, I multiply by 8, I subtract 4, and I get 52. And that is that equation. Now what you'll be doing today is just writing these equations. At the end of the worksheet, I have also suggested that you try and work out the missing numbers if you can, and that's okay. And we'll be talking about how to do that later on. At the moment, we're really concentrating on writing these equations and understanding how to show these functions. And multiply should be written like that, with the number and the letter beside each other. And divide really should be written like that. If you can't get your head around these two things, you can write them like that for today.